Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. My parents and siblings seemed so close-knit, like a unit I could never fully join. I chalked it up to being the middle child, neither the golden firstborn nor the baby of the family. Little did I know that this dynamic would come back to bite me in the most dramatic way imaginable. This story begins 2 years ago when my grandmother passed away. She was a fiercely independent woman, and, despite being close to 90, she handled her affairs with razor-sharp clarity. She and I had always shared a bond. While my parents and siblings saw her as a somewhat aloof elder, I adored her quiet wisdom and her dry sense of humor. We spent hours together during my teenage years, chatting over tea or gardening in her yard. She was my confidant, and I was hers. When she passed, it felt like a piece of my heart had been carved out. I barely had time to grieve before the drama began. The reading of the will. A month after the funeral, we were called to the lawyer's office for the will reading. I wasn't expecting much. My grandmother wasn't wealthy by any means. She lived frugally and valued experiences over material possessions. But to everyone's shock, especially mine, she left me her house and a substantial portion of her savings. The rest of the family wasn't left empty-handed, of course. My parents received some heirlooms, and my siblings were given token amounts. But the bulk of her estate was mine. That's when the mood in the room shifted. My mother's lips thinned into a line, and my siblings exchanged wide-eyed glances. My father, usually the calm one, outright asked the lawyer if there had been a mistake. No mistake, the lawyer replied, pushing his glasses up his nose. This was Mrs. Thompson's explicit wish. I didn't know what to say. I was stunned and honestly a little embarrassed. It felt awkward to be singled out, especially when I could feel the daggers being glared at me from across the table. The gaslighting begins. At first, my family played it cool. They congratulated me and pretended they were happy for me. But as the weeks went by, their true feelings seeped through. It started with subtle comments. My mom would mention how much upkeep a house required and how I probably wouldn't have time for it with my busy schedule. My older sister, Sarah, dropped hints about how unfair it was that I got so much when we're all her family. My younger brother, Jake, outright said, "It doesn't make sense. Grandma wasn't all there at the end." Then came the outright attempts to rewrite reality. My dad sat me down one evening and said, "You know, your grandmother probably didn't mean to leave you the house. She talked a lot about keeping things equal between the family. Maybe the lawyer misinterpreted her wishes." I was floored. "Dad, the will was crystal clear. She left the house to me because she wanted me to have it." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "I just think it's worth considering what Grandma would have wanted if she'd been thinking clearly." I didn't realize it then, but this was the beginning of their coordinated effort to gaslight me into giving up the inheritance. Escalation. The pressure ramped up over the next few months. My mom started telling me stories about how confused Grandma had been in her final years, claiming she often forgot names or mixed up dates. She even suggested that I must have influenced her decision. "You were always over there talking to her," she said with a pointed look. "Maybe she thought she had to leave you the house." My sister took a different approach. She began guilt-tripping me. "You know, I'm struggling to save up for a down payment on a house, and Jake just had a baby. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell the house and split the money? That way, everyone benefits." When I refused, she accused me of being selfish. "Grandma wouldn't want you to tear this family apart over money." I tried to stay strong, but the constant barrage was exhausting. They tag-teamed me, bringing it up at family dinners, calling me out of the blue, even sending long-winded emails about family unity and doing the right thing. The final straw. The breaking point came about 6 months after the will reading. I'd been ignoring most of their comments and focusing on renovating the house, which had fallen into disrepair in Grandma's later years. One evening, I came home to find my mother and sister in the house, rummaging through my things. "What are you doing?" I yelled, startled and furious. My mom had the audacity to look annoyed. "We're just looking for some of Grandma's keepsakes. Things that belong to the family. You can't just break into my house." "This isn't your house," my sister snapped. "It's the family's house. You're just squatting here because of a piece of paper." That was it. I called the police. They left before the officers arrived, but the message was clear. They weren't going to stop. The fallout. I went no contact with my family after that incident. I changed the locks, installed security cameras, and even got a restraining order against my mom and sister when they started showing up unannounced. It wasn't easy. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I was being too harsh. But therapy helped me see the truth. They weren't upset about Grandma's wishes. They were upset about losing control. A year later, I sold the house. Not because they wanted me to, but because I wanted a fresh start. I used the money to move to a new city and start my own business, something Grandma had always encouraged me to do. My family still tries to reach out occasionally, mostly to guilt me or demand a share of the money. But I've learned to set boundaries and protect myself. Grandma always told me, trust your instincts and don't let anyone bully you into doubting yourself. I think she knew even back then what kind of people I was dealing with. To anyone else out there dealing with toxic family dynamics, trust yourself. Sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do. Update. Life after cutting off my family. It's been about a year and a half since I shared my story, and so much has changed since then. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone who supported me in the original post. Your advice, validation, and personal stories gave me the strength to stick to my boundaries. I wanted to share where I am now and how things have evolved. My new life. After selling my grandmother's house, I used part of the money to move to a different state. It was a big leap, but I realized I needed a complete fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment in a city I'd always dreamed of living in. The change of scenery has done wonders for my mental health. I also used some of the money to start a small business. It's been a long-time dream of mine, but I never had the resources or confidence to take the plunge. Grandma always believed in me, though, and I like to think she'd be proud. The business is still growing, but it's already doing well enough to support me, and I feel like I've found my purpose. Therapy made all the difference. Cutting off my family wasn't easy, even though it was necessary. There were moments when the guilt felt overwhelming, especially during the holidays. I started seeing a therapist regularly, and it's been a game changer. Through therapy, I've unpacked a lot of the toxic dynamics in my family. My parents and siblings always operated on a team mentality, where dissenting voices were silenced. I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, only to be gaslit and manipulated when I didn't fall in line. Recognizing that pattern helped me let go of the guilt and focus on building healthier relationships elsewhere. My family tried to reconnect. Of course, my family didn't take no contact lying down. A few months after I moved, they began reaching out in various ways. At first, it was through emails and texts. They'd write long, emotional messages about how they missed me and wanted to heal the rift in the family. When I didn't respond, their tone shifted. The messages became more accusatory. How could you abandon us after everything we've done for you? Grandma would be heartbroken to see you acting like this. We're family. Money shouldn't come between us. I ignored them all. It was clear they weren't actually apologizing or acknowledging their behavior. They just wanted me back under their control. Then about 6 months ago, my mom tried to show up at my new apartment unannounced. I have no idea how she found out where I live. Still creeps me out, but luckily I had my security system in place. When I saw her on the camera, I didn't even open the door. I told her through the intercom to leave or I'd call the police. She left, but not without shouting about how ungrateful I was. After that, I filed another restraining order, this time including my dad and brother, since they'd been CC'd on some of the more aggressive emails. Building my chosen family. The most beautiful part of this journey has been discovering what real love and support look like. Since moving, I've made incredible friends who have become like family to me. They don't demand anything from me except kindness and mutual respect. One of my closest friends even helped me host a grandma celebration day on her birthday this year. We cooked her favorite recipes, shared stories, and laughed until we cried. It felt so healing to honor her in a way that was free from the negativity my biological family tried to impose. A surprise revelation. Here's the twist I wasn't expecting. After going no contact, I started hearing from distant relatives, cousins, great aunts, and even an old family friend. Apparently, my parents have been spreading a very different version of events to extended family, painting me as a greedy, manipulative person who tricked my grandmother into giving me her estate. But here's the kicker. Most of these relatives didn't buy it. Several of them reached out to me privately to share their support, and even confirmed that my grandmother had openly talked about her decision to leave me the house. One cousin told me, "She adored you. She always said you were the only one who truly listened to her and cared about her wishes. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that." Hearing that was like a balm to my soul. Where I am now, I'm still a work in progress, but for the first time in years, I feel at peace. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and trust. To anyone going through something similar, you're not alone, and you're not a bad person for standing up for yourself. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. Thank you again to everyone who encouraged me to stay strong. My grandma's memory lives on in my heart, and I know she'd want me to live a life full of joy and authenticity. TLDR, after going no contact with my toxic family, I moved to a new city, started a business, and found peace. Despite their attempts to guilt and stalk me, I've built a new life with chosen family and am finally free of their manipulation. Story 2. My family turned against me when I refused to sign over the family property. Family is supposed to be your safe haven, right? That's what I thought too, until my own family turned on me in a way I never imagined possible. This isn't an easy story to share, but maybe someone out there will see themselves in my experience and know they're not alone. It all started after my dad passed away 2 years ago. He'd owned a small but valuable piece of property, about 5 acres of land that had been in the family for generations. Growing up, we always called it the family land. My siblings and I played there as kids, running through the tall grass and climbing the old oak trees. My dad took care of it meticulously, and he always talked about how much it meant to him. When he passed, I assumed the land would stay in the family forever. I didn't expect that it would tear us apart. The unexpected will. After Dad's funeral, we sat down for the reading of the will. To everyone's surprise, mine included, Dad left the property to me. I have 2 older siblings, Emily and Ben. They were both visibly stunned when the lawyer read that part of the will. My mom, who's usually quiet and reserved, gasped out loud. The lawyer explained that Dad's decision was intentional. He had left me the property because, out of the 3 of us, I was the only one who had shown interest in preserving it. Over the years, I'd helped him with maintenance and had always been the one to visit with him, even after I moved out. I was overwhelmed by the gesture. To me, it wasn't about the value of the land. It was about carrying on something my dad had cared deeply about. But my siblings saw it differently. The pressure begins. At first, Emily and Ben pretended to be happy for me. They even made comments like, "Dad knew what he was doing, and you'll take good care of it." But it didn't take long for their true feelings to surface. A couple of weeks after the will reading, Emily invited me over for coffee. I thought she just wanted to catch up, but as soon as we sat down, she launched into a speech. "Look, I've been thinking about Dad's decision, and I just don't think it's fair," she said, stirring her coffee aggressively. "That land belongs to all of us. It's family property, not yours to keep." I was taken aback. "Emily, you heard the lawyer. Dad made it clear he wanted me to have it." She waved her hand dismissively. "Dad wasn't thinking straight. He was sick, and you were always around, probably putting ideas in his head." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you saying I manipulated Dad? That's insane." She shrugged. "I'm saying we should do what's right and sell the land. Split the money 3 ways. That's fair." I left the conversation feeling gutted. But that was just the beginning. United front. Soon, Ben joined in. He called me a few days later, echoing Emily's argument. "Look, you don't even live near the property anymore. What are you going to do with it? It's just sitting there when we could sell it for a fortune." When I told him I wasn't selling, he got nasty. "So, you're just going to hoard it for yourself? What about Mom? She could use that money for retirement." Then my mom got involved. At first, I thought she'd be on my side. She was always Dad's biggest supporter and loved that property almost as much as he did. But instead, she told me, "Honey, I know your father meant well, but this situation is creating so much tension. Why don't you just sell it and keep the peace? It felt like a punch to the gut. My own mother was asking me to go against Dad's final wishes to appease my siblings. The gaslighting. As the months went by, the pressure only got worse. My siblings started calling me regularly, sometimes together, sometimes separately. They'd say things like, "You're being selfish. Dad wouldn't want this fighting. You're tearing this family apart over a piece of dirt. If you really cared about us, you'd do the right thing." At one point, Emily tried to guilt me by saying, "Ben and I have kids, you know. That money could go toward their futures. You don't even have kids. What do you need the land for?" It was infuriating. They completely ignored the fact that I had poured time, effort, and love into that property, just like Dad had. They made it sound like I was some greedy villain when all I wanted was to honor Dad's memory. The last straw. Things reached a boiling point when I found out Ben had been taking potential buyers to see the land behind my back. I only found out because one of the neighbors called me, confused about why strangers were walking around. I confronted Ben, furious. "What the hell are you doing, showing people the property without my permission?" He didn't even try to deny it. "I'm trying to fix your mess. If you won't sell it, I'll find someone who can make you an offer you can't refuse." That was it for me. I told him if he or Emily stepped foot on the land again, I'd file a restraining order. The fallout. I went low contact with my family after that. It was heartbreaking, but I couldn't keep subjecting myself to their manipulations. I hired a lawyer to make sure my ownership of the property was airtight and installed security cameras to deter trespassers. My siblings tried to rally the extended family against me, but to my surprise, several relatives sided with me. They remembered how much time I spent with Dad and how passionate he was about me preserving the land. As for the property, I've started turning it into a sanctuary. I'm planting a wildflower meadow and building a small memorial garden for Dad. Every time I'm there, I feel close to him, and I know I'm doing the right thing. Moving forward, my relationship with my family will probably never recover, but I've made peace with that. I've learned that sometimes standing your ground means losing people who can't respect your boundaries. To anyone dealing with similar family conflicts, trust yourself. You don't owe anyone your inheritance, your peace, or your happiness. Do what's right for you. TLDR. My dad left me the family property in his will, and my siblings turned on me, pressuring me to sell it and split the money. After months of gaslighting and manipulation, I went low contact, protected the land, and honored my dad's memory. Update. How I moved on after the family property drama. It's been a little over a year since I first shared my story, and wow, what a journey it's been. Thank you so much to everyone who reached out with kind words, advice, and personal stories. Knowing I wasn't alone made all the difference. I wanted to give an update on where things stand with the property, my family, and most importantly, myself. The property. The family property is thriving, and honestly, it's been a labor of love. After installing security cameras and making it clear to my siblings that any further interference would result in legal action, I finally had the peace of mind to focus on restoring and preserving the land. I hired a local landscaper to help me clean up the overgrown areas, but I've done most of the work myself. It's been incredibly therapeutic. I planted a wildflower meadow like I'd planned, and it's now a vibrant, buzzing haven for bees, butterflies, and birds. I also set up a small memorial garden for my dad, a quiet corner with a bench surrounded by his favorite plants. Spending time there feels like reconnecting with him. Every time I sit in the garden or walk the trails we used to explore, I'm reminded of why I fought so hard to keep this land. Family dynamics. Unfortunately, my relationship with my family hasn't improved much. I'm still low contact with my mom and siblings. After the last confrontation, Ben and Emily seemed to back off, probably because they realized I wasn't going to cave. But the silence hasn't come with any apologies or olive branches. Every now and then, I hear from mutual relatives that Emily and Ben are still bitter about the situation. They've painted me as selfish and greedy, which stings, but I've learned to let it roll off my back. The people who truly know me understand the truth, and that's all that matters. Surprisingly, I've reconnected with some distant family members who reached out after hearing about the drama. A couple of them remembered how close I was to my dad and shared stories about their own struggles with family inheritance disputes. It's been comforting to know I'm not the only one who's dealt with this kind of toxicity. My mom, on the other hand, has been harder to deal with. She still occasionally calls or texts, always with the same message. Why can't you just make things right? But when I ask her what she thinks making things right means, it always circles back to selling the property or giving Emily and Ben a share. At this point, I've stopped engaging. My personal growth. What's really surprised me is how much this whole ordeal has changed me for the better. At first, I felt like I'd lost everything. My relationship with my family, my sense of security, even a bit of my faith in people. But over time, I've come to realize that setting boundaries was an act of self-respect, not selfishness. Therapy has been a huge part of my healing process. My therapist helped me unpack the guilt and anxiety I carried for so long. We've worked on redefining what family means to me, and I've started to focus on building my own support system. I've also made some amazing friends in the local community where the property is located. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Marjorie, told me she used to walk those trails with her kids years ago. Now, she stops by to see the wildflowers and chat. Another neighbor, a retired carpenter, offered to help me build a small shed for gardening tools, just because he liked what I was doing with the place. It's moments like these that remind me I didn't just fight for a piece of land. I fought for a piece of myself. A twist I didn't expect. Here's something I didn't see coming. Ben recently reached out. After a year of silence, he sent me a surprisingly civil email. He didn't apologize outright, but he admitted that he might have been too aggressive about the property and said he wanted to move past the conflict. I'm still wary, but it's a step in the right direction. I replied, thanking him for reaching out and agreeing that we should focus on healing. I made it clear, though, that the land isn't up for discussion. Emily, however, remains radio silent. I don't know if she'll ever come around, and I've made peace with the idea that she might not. Looking ahead, I'm in a much better place now than I was when this all started. The property feels like a second home to me, and I've even started hosting small gatherings there with my new friends and some supportive family members. As for my siblings, I've realized that while I'll always love them, I can't let their bitterness dictate my life. I've mourned the version of our relationship I thought we had, and now I'm focusing on building a future that honors my dad's memory and my own happiness. To anyone who's going through something similar, I want you to know this. It's okay to stand your ground. It's okay to prioritize your peace over someone else's demands. And most of all, it's okay to walk away from relationships that hurt more than they heal. Thank you again for all the encouragement and wisdom you shared with me. You've helped me more than you'll ever know. TLDR, the family property is thriving, and so am I. While my siblings are still bitter, I've made peace with the situation and built a new life surrounded by supportive friends and distant relatives. My brother recently reached out to mend fences, but my focus remains on preserving the land and honoring my dad's legacy.